Hello, I'm Dr. Scott, and welcome back to Cellular Truth. Here's the clinical reality of perimenopause that most medical encounters never address. The fatigue, the anxiety, the cognitive changes, the sleep disruption, these are not physiologic symptoms dressed up as hormonal ones. They are the direct downstream effects of a specific cellular transition, the decline of estrogen, which is not just a reproductive hormone, but a master regulator of the energy generators inside every cell in your body. When that regulation shifts, cellular energy output drops. The efforts stay the same, the capacity changes. And the women I see in clinic are working as hard as they ever have, producing less and blaming themselves for it. This video is about the biology behind that and what actually helps. Here's a clinical picture that most people just don't know. Nearly 95% of women in perimenopause report fatigue and exhaustion as their primary experience. Not hot flashes, not night sweats, bone deep tiredness that does not respond to rest in the way it used to. Nearly 40% of women seeking care for these symptoms are misdiagnosed, most commonly with anxiety or depression, not because their physicians are negligent, but because only 31% of US OBGYN residency programs include any dedicated menopause curriculum. The system was not built to recognize what is actually happening. The cellular reason fatigue does not respond to rest, and the one conversation that changes everything we're going to talk about in the next few minutes. So here's what we're covering today: a patient story, composite and anonymized, real in every way that matters, the cellular mechanisms that explain what happened to her, a conversation about hormone therapy that the standard medical encounter is not often happening, and 5 specific things that can actually help in the right order. I will tell you clearly where the research is solid and where my clinical experience is filling the gaps. Let's set the scene here. She comes in composed. She's always coming in composed. That is part of who she is, part of how she navigated a career and a family and everything else that she's been carrying for 20 years. She sits down, and before I've asked a single question, she says, "I think something is wrong with me." Not her hormones, not her body, her, just something wrong with her. So she's 47. She's been waking at 3 o'clock in the morning for 8 months and cannot get back to sleep. She's anxious in a way that she's never been anxious before, not about anything specific, just a low level hum that is always there with her. She's crying at things that would not have touched her 2 years ago. She's forgetting words mid sentence. She's working as hard as she's ever has and producing less. She's exhausted in a way that a good night's sleep, on a rare occasion when she gets one, does not fix. She's been to her GP, her thyroid is fine, her iron is fine, her blood work is unremarkable. And she's concluded, in the absence of any other explanation, that she's simply not trying hard enough. And I can't tell you how common this is when I hear it. And this is not the case. Her feeling and her symptoms have nothing to do with effort. It has everything to do with one of the most important biological relationships in the female body, one that nobody told her was changing. What she goes on to describe to me over the next 20 minutes is not unusual. I've heard versions of the story many, many times. The fatigue does not respond to rest. The anxiety appears without a trigger. The emotional responses that feel outsized. The cognitive changes, words that disappear mid-sentence. The name that will not come. Focus used to be reliable and now is not. The body that feels foreign. The woman who used to know her own rhythms and now cannot predict anything. And then she tells me something that stops me. Before coming to see me, she went to a regular doctor and asked specifically about hormone therapy. She had read about it. She thought it might help. Her doctor told her she did not need treatment, that menopause is a natural process, that every woman goes through. She left without a prescription, without a referral, without an explanation for what was happening to her body. She'd been told in the kindest possible way that she was experiencing what was simply the cost of being a woman in her 40s, and that the appropriate response was to accept it. She is not unusual either. Nearly 40% of women seeking care for perimenopause symptoms report being misdiagnosed, most commonly with anxiety or depression. Only about 30% of eligible women are ever offered hormone therapy at all. And the reason is structural, not malicious. Only 31% of US OBGYN residents actually get any programming or education dedicated to menopause. Most doctors were simply never taught this. This is not a story about a bad doctor. It's a story about a healthcare system that was not built to understand what happens to women's bodies in their 40s. And women are paying that price for this gap. And this is very common. Here's what she tried before coming to see me. And I want to be clear that every one of these things was the right call given what she knew. She started going to bed earlier. She cut out alcohol. She added magnesium. She started therapy, cognitive therapy. She downloaded a meditation app. She adjusted her diet. She began exercising more consistently. Some of it helped a little. None of it touched the exhaustion or the anxiety at their root. She was doing the right things in the wrong sequence, not because she made a mistake, but because nobody gave her the information she needed to understand what was actually happening underneath everything she was trying. Here is the moment in the appointment that changes everything. I asked her, "When did your period start becoming irregular?" She thinks for a moment. She says, "About 18 months ago, maybe 2 years." "And when did the fatigue start?" I asked. She pauses. The recognition moves across her face before she says it. "Around the same time." She had never connected those two things. Nobody connected them for her. The irregular periods and the bone deep exhaustion had been living in two separate mental categories, one hormonal inconvenience, the other a personal failure. They are the same story, and the cellular biology explains exactly why. Now, here's the biology. Every term explained as I use it. Most people understand estrogen as a reproductive hormone, the one that regulates the menstrual cycle and declines in menopause. That understanding is correct. It is also dramatically incomplete. Estrogen is also a master regulator of cellular energy, not as a metaphor, but literally. Inside every cell in your body are structures called mitochondria, the energy generators. Think of them as the power plants that convert food and oxygen to the fuel your cells actually run on. That fuel is called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Or think of it simply as the battery charge inside every single cell. Every thought, every muscle contraction, every neurotransmitter, every emotional regulation, every cognitive task, all of it runs on ATP, about 150 pounds of it every single day. Estrogen, it turns out, is one of the primary operators of these power plants. It directly activates the proteins that run the energy conservation processes inside mitochondria. It supports the efficiency of the whole system. When estrogen is present at healthy levels, the power plants run well. When estrogen starts to fluctuate and decline, which is exactly what happens in perimenopause, often years before the final period, the power plants become less efficient. They produce less ATP per unit of effort. The output drops, not because the person stopped trying, because the operator stepped back. The short version is this. Estrogen and your mitochondria have been in partnership your entire adult life. When estrogen starts to shift, so does everything your cells can produce. The effort stays the same, the cellular output changes. This is why fatigue does not respond to rest. Rest restores you when your mitochondria are functioning well. When mitochondria efficiency is dropped, rest gives you what it can, but the ceiling is lower. You can rest more than you can ever have, and you still feel like you're operating below capacity, because at the cellular level, you absolutely are. Think of it like a car that has quietly switched from premium fuel to regular. The driver is still doing everything right, still filling the tank, still maintaining the vehicle. The car is just not running the way it used to. Not because of anything the driver did, because what is going into the engine has changed. Now let's talk about hormone therapy, because this is where it enters the picture and why it matters at the cellular level. So hormone therapy, replacing estrogen and progesterone that are declining, is not just a symptom management tool. For the right women at the right time, it is a cellular energy intervention. Restoring estrogen levels directly supports mitochondrial function. It gives the power plants their operator back. The research on this is real. Estrogen receptors exist on mitochondria and directly influence how efficiently they produce energy. Hormone therapy in the right candidate does not just reduce hot flashes, it supports the cellular substrate for everything else. What's crazy is the FDA spent over 2 decades putting black box warnings on hormone therapy because data, specifically from one study, the Women's Health Initiative, showed that older women, older formulations, and oral estrogen did not do well in some women. And the thing is, it's not how we think about taking hormone therapy. These warnings were removed in 2026 because it was the wrong types of therapy we were doing, the wrong bioidentical therapy, which means that for more than 20 years, a generation of physicians was trained to be afraid of a tool that for many of their patients was exactly what they needed. The result, millions of women were undertreated. And a patient sitting in my office who asked her doctor about it and was told she was probably too young, she was not too young. She was exactly in the window where it matters most. And here's why I want to be precise. The estrogen mitochondrial relationship is well documented in basic science research. Estrogen receptors exist on mitochondria and directly influence their function. The clinical evidence that hormone therapy improves mitochondrial efficiency specifically, as opposed to reducing symptoms, is promising but not yet comprehensive in controlled trials. What I can say from clinical practice is that when patients address hormonal picture alongside mitochondrial support, they do better. And the ones really addressing one or the other just don't do as well. The mechanisms support that observation. The large-scale trials to fully confirm it are still being done. So we have to be aware of that. Now, I've talked about this a lot on the channel where we've talked about something called the cell danger response. When my mitochondrial output drops, the CDR threshold drops with it. Less cellular energy means the alarm fires more easily and resets more slowly. The anxiety that appears without a trigger, the emotional responses that feel outsized, the sleep that will not hold. These are nervous system running on a reduced cellular energy with a hair trigger alarm. The biology is consistent. The experience is not a mystery. It just needed the right explanation. Targeted nutritional support for energy conversion processes inside the mitochondria. We had an honest conversation about hormone therapy, what the current evidence actually says, what her specific risk profile looked like, and why the conversation her previous doctor declined to have was one she deserved to have. She started a low-dose transdermal estrogen protocol under careful monitoring, not oral, bioidentical estrogen. We matched her movement to her current energy capacity rather than the capacity she had 2 years ago. We protected her sleep as non-negotiable. 3 months later, she sat down and said, I feel like myself again, not the old version, a different version, but mine. That is what this transition is capable of, not a return, a becoming. But most of the conversation is happening at the level of symptoms and hormones, hot flashes, HRT, sleep, libido. The cellular layer underneath is almost never part of the conversation. And that cellular layer, that's where the exhaustion lives. That's where the anxiety lives, where the cognitive changes live, where the grief lives, because the grief of this transition, when it arrives, is not just about the end of fertility. It's about losing access to a version of yourself that has a certain capacity, a reserve, a capacity that was cellular, not characterological, not yours to have prevented a transition. The grief is real, the biology explains it, and naming both honestly at the same time is the most useful thing that I know how to do. Here are 5 specific takeaways that can help in the order that actually matters. Number 1, get the right conversation with the right physician. Find a physician who is specifically trained in perimenopause and menopause. Not all doctors have it, only 31% of OBGYNs. Learn about this in curriculum. You may need to seek out a menopause specialist or a functional medicine physician or integrative doc with this kind of background. You deserve a provider who can evaluate hormone therapy as a genuine option rather than a default no. Number 2, ask specifically about hormone therapy and ask about the current evidence. The FDA removed the longstanding black box warnings from hormone therapy products in early 2026 after acknowledging that they had been applied incorrectly for over 2 decades. For many women in the right window, typically within 10 years of starting perimenopause, hormone therapy is not just symptom management, it is preventative medicine for the heart, for the brain, and the bones, and is a mitochondrial support tool. That conversation should be available to you. Number 3, support your mitochondria directly. Whether or not you're doing hormone therapy, whether it's right for you, the mitochondria picture matters independently of this as well. Key nutritional supports for mitochondrial energy include things like CoQ10, B vitamins, particularly B2 and B3, magnesium, and targeted antioxidants. I use metabolomic testing in my clinical practice to help navigate this, looking at whole levels and spectrum of vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and cofactors. Your gut's important here. If you have a leaky gut, an inflamed gut, that's also going to make mitochondrial dysfunction more likely. What applies depends on your individual picture, of course. So use these as starting points for a conversation with your provider, not a protocol to follow alone. Number 4, protect sleep as a biological priority, not a lifestyle preference. Sleep is when mitochondrial repairs happen. Mitochondrial efficiency has already dropped during perimenopause. Losing sleep compounds that deficit faster than most people realize. Consistent bedtimes and consistent wake times, same every day, is the single most accessible thing you can do to your cellular energy right now. Not perfect sleep, doesn't matter in the beginning, consistent sleep. Number 5, match your movement to your current capacity, not your previous one. Gentle daily movement, 20 minutes of walking outside directly supports mitochondrial function and lowers cortisol levels. The goal right now is not performance, it's cellular signaling. You're not trying to be who you were 2 years ago. You're working with your cells right now, how they are, when they are. Do what you can with what you got. My final treatise for all of you listening is this. If you are in a transition or if you love someone that is, I want to say something directly. The exhaustion is not in your head. The anxiety is not weakness. The cognitive changes are not early dementia. The emotional responses that you feel outsized are not a personality shift. These are the downstream effects of a cellular transition that is real, measurable, and almost entirely absent from the conversation most women are having with their doctors. You are not falling behind because you stopped trying. You are navigating a biological shift in what your cells can produce and doing it most likely while maintaining every other demand your life has placed on you. That is not a failure. That is an extraordinary amount of carrying with a fuel system that is quietly changing underneath you. The grief of this transition is allowed. The grief of losing access to a version of yourself you did not know you were going to miss, the one who slept through the night, the one who found the world instantly, who recovered from a hard week by Saturday morning. That grief deserves to be named, not pushed through, not optimized away, named. And then once it's named, there's a cellular story about what comes next. One that starts not with trying harder, but with understanding what your cells actually need right now and giving it to them in the right order. Remember, you have not lost yourself. You're in the middle of something and you're becoming something new, and that's okay. The biology says that it is possible. You have seen it happen. You have not lost yourself. You're in the middle of something and becoming something new. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Cellular Truth. My name is Dr. Scott Schur. We'll see you next week.